Hey everybody, here's this week's paper to pixel to paper again video. This one is going to be covering a comparison between a pretty good prosumer scanner and what I would consider the Cadillac of scanners, the Epson 10000/11,000/12,000, and give you an idea of the differences that the two present, and hopefully would help you make a comparison as to whether or not you would benefit from one versus the other. I don't really get into color matching very much, but we'll take care of that in another installment. But basically this is focused just on optical sharpness. How sharp is the image that you capture, and what can you do with it after the fact? And I also wanted to mention that this series is made possible by people who are supporting us on Patreon, and also people who make one-time donations to the Living the Line YouTube, or sorry, the Living the Line PayPal account. So please consider being a patron if you're enjoying this video, if it's benefiting you. This is a supplement to the second article. This is not intended to necessarily be totally standalone. So please do read that article. It gives you way too much information about these topics and will hopefully be helpful to you. Hey everybody, this is Sean. Today I am going to be taking a look at a quick image comparison between the two scanners that we use to scan the original artwork for Strange Death of Alex Raymond. This comparison is going to be with an image that most of us have access to, which is a dollar bill. Now, one thing you should know before you do this comparison on your own is that a dollar bill is not scannable on its whole on most scanners. You'll get an error message or it'll freeze up. So you only need to be able to scan the middle for the purpose of what we're doing here, the line art. And so that's what we're going to do. There's actually a hidden code on the dollar bill with several different points those corresponding points, when they show up together, cause the scanner to freeze up and give an error message. Believe it or not, you can try it yourself if you want to find out. Anyway, today we're going to be comparing two scanners. The scanner that I end up recommending in my article series, paper to pixel to paper again, and also a much more affordable Epson Workforce scanner that Carson Gruba, the co-author of Strange Death of Alex Raymond, used to scan a lot of his original artwork. And as we're going to discuss in the video here, there's not really much of a comparison in terms of image quality. Under the ideal circumstances, they're fairly comparable for line art in terms of resolution and sharpness, and under less than ideal circumstances, such as scanning a dollar bill that's wrinkled, you will see that the Workforce is very much inferior. But let's take a look at the comparison. Okay, so this first scan was scanned by Carson on his Workforce scanner. This was a raw scan. This was just the image. Sorry, this is a raw scan. This was just the center of the bill, and we're focusing on looking at the sharpness of the scan. And you can see this is wildly out of focus. Look over here at this point right here, and you can probably get an idea why that would be. And that's because these Epson Workforce scanners use an inferior type of image sensor that has a very, very narrow depth of field. So the depth of field on the sensor is only a millimeter or two. And everything that is past that distance, everything that's not pressed up right against the platen, is actually out of focus. So you can see in this case that the forehead here, George's forehead, is much more in focus than the rest of it. So that part was relatively flat to the scanner glass, the platen. And then all these parts here were picking up. And so this was scanned at 1,200 pixels per inch, which if you will look at the accompanying video, the accompanying article, you'll see that is the resolution that I have determined is best for when you are scanning materials that have fine line art and you're going to reproduce them at the same size. That is something that has very, very microscopic detail, 1,200 pixels per inch. You're going to convert that to line art at the end. That's a good resolution for at-size materials, or things that have already been pre-shrunken. With larger originals that you're going to shrink down, or something that you're going to only reproduce in color, you don't have to get anywhere near that resolution. But that is what we scan this at, and you can see just from the resolution space that was necessary. But you can also see from the scan, this is an unusably blurry scan. So what Carson did is he did what any mechanical, he came up with a mechanical solution. That is, he pressed the book, he pressed it down with the heaviest book that he could find, his copy of the Puma Blues collection that Dover Press put out in 2012. And he pressed it down with all of his weight. And so this is what it looks like with a 5-pound book on top of it, and then Carson pressing down the entire time during the scan. And you can still see there's a lot of areas that are out of focus. In fact, these are unusably out of focus, these little areas right here. Now, granted, not all of the things that you're going to scan are going to be, this variable in terms of the surface. And so maybe that's not going to be a problem for you, and maybe that this Epson Workforce is going to be a usable sharpness for you. And indeed, the pages that Carson scanned of his artwork, which are flat and working on Bristol board that is fairly a firm surface, those scans look pretty good. And so this was a usable scanner for us during the production of Strange Death of Alex Raymond, so that he didn't have to ship me his pages or anything like that. So quite the deal for a few $100s. However, the king of the scanners. This is a scan for, this is a raw scan. This bill is obviously in much worse shape than the other one. This is a raw scan of the Epson 10000XL. This is the one that I use for all my production stuff. And I was looking at this, and you can see, even though it has a much wider range of focus, even these really bad folds are actually fairly out of focus. Not nearly as bad as the other one. Let's go ahead and take a look at his raw scan. You can see the difference here. So this one, unweighted, just laid directly on the scanner, still has a little bit of focus problems. You can see the folds that are happening right there. So obviously this is a fairly extreme case. But even that, you can see it's still fairly sharp. Now, this comparison might not look quite the same on your screen because his Carson scan is adjusted so that the blacks are a little bit closer to being black. And this one is not adjusted yet. But if you actually zoom way in, you can see, even unweighted, this is much sharper. The actual capture of it is sharper, and there's less variation. So let's go ahead and take a look at this one. And this is with a little bit of weight on there. I just put a heavy book right on the scanner, and didn't press down or anything like that. And you can see that overall, that was a much better impression. So let's go ahead and do an apples to apples comparison here. Let's go ahead and adjust this. Let's pretend that we are going to do a edition of this for, we're going to print this as a line art, and we're going to print it, fairly large. So let's go ahead and take this through the adjustment process. So the first thing I'm going to do with a color scan like this, let's pretend this is line art. Let's say we're going to reproduce this at the exact same size that it was. Or what the heck, let's do it bigger than that. What we're going to do first is we have to convert this image into this color image into a grayscale image first. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use my black and white filter. And this is immediately going to give you an idea why I always recommend that you scan in color, even if you're going to be reproducing as line art. Because this black and white filter here enables you to grab different color bands and adjust those color bands independently. And so what you can do is you can really futz with it. If you have, for instance, a certain kind of paper color, you can de-emphasize the paper color by grabbing the corresponding sliders and making those adjustments. Now here, you can see that I'm using the green and the yellow filters to really make sure that I am getting rid of that paper color. Used to see this a lot in the 60s and 70s when artists would do convention sketches or things like that that were not meant for reproduction. They would oftentimes work on colored paper. Well, that's not really an issue getting rid of that anymore. So we've reduced this to just the line art stage, and you can see, this is really pushing the boundaries of what you can reproduce from this particular object. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use a curves adjustment, and I'm going to basically bring this up until the black is actually black. And you can see right here this gap. This is all of the data that's not being used. I'm just this is like your gamut, and it's showing you that your black point is not set to black right now. Now every image doesn't necessarily have a pure black, but in case of line art, it's useful for us to get this closer to pure black. And you can see that there's actually a little bit of schmutz that's hanging out there. That's not the actual pure engraving lines, but is a little bit of a hangover from, either the paper texture or something like that. So this is not going to be the cleanest image that I've ever seen in my life. If we were going to do this super clean, we would need to get a better condition original, or launder our original. Don't ever overestimate don't ever underestimate the amount of adjustment you can make to a physical object prior to scanning. There's all different types of tricks that you can do, and we'll probably talk about some of those in here. Okay, so I've knocked out my most of my paper here, and we get a clearer appreciation of what the lines are and what the lines aren't. And you can see we actually have a little bit of schmutz here still. I'm just going to go ahead and hit Control-Z a couple times so we can back up and follow the steps here that we took. So you can see that schmutz was actually it's like dirt or wear on the paper. Okay, so we're actually going to now convert our image into a grayscale image. I'm going to go ahead and merge that and discard all of my color information. Yeah, and so these finest lines are really going to be hard to pick up in our final image because of how damaged this was. Actually, let's go back here, and we can actually compare these a little bit more one-on-one. You can see in terms of the optical sharpness, they actually have a lot of variability between these two images. You can see different parts that were picked up by the Carson's impression better, and the bill is actually just slightly different. But you can see his, for instance, the lips, that's just not even line. This just looks like tone right now, whereas we've got actual bona fide lines there. Okay, so if I was going to reproduce this is the only dollar bill that's left in the world, so I can't get a physical another one. I would probably iron this before I would scan it, but this gives you a pretty good idea of the amount of detail that you can get out of your Epson 10000XL or Epson 11000XL or Epson 12000XL.